Attention bobsled riders! You will soon be embarking on a thrilling podcast down the icy slopes of the Matterhorn. So please remain seated, keeping your hands, arms, feet, and legs inside the bobsled at all times. Auf Wiedersehen!
All rise for the people versus Disneyland. We are the Matterhorn Yodelers. And I'm Japheth, and I'm here with
Peter.
Jackie.
And we are going to go over a very interesting book today.
Yes.
It's a book that I got my fellow Yodeler Peter here.
Yes.
For his, was it Christmas or your birthday?
I think it was Christmas.
Yes.
Because you got it at the D23 convention.
Yes.
Yes. And Jackie was there with me when I got it.
Yeah, we met the author.
Yes. So I got him a book called The People versus Disneyland. And it's a book by David Koenig. I think, and he's throughout the community of Disney.
He's pretty relevant. He's written a lot of books, mostly on Disney World, on their secrets and things like that. And so, but he has written some Disneyland ones. But and this was definitely a unique book for him to write. He's not like a law author or anything. He's a big Disney fan, and he wrote a book about, all the lawsuits associated with Disneyland.
And that's what we're going to discuss. We're going to discuss people's cases against Disneyland and events and the outcomes from some of these events, and kind of get our thoughts. Like, all three of us read this book different times, so it may be harder. We may be recalling from one another what they were, pulling from notes. But it was very fascinating.
Before we get into that, though, I'm curious. Oh, you specifically picked that book out for me. I'm curious, what made you think that I would want this book when you picked it out?
Hey, it's Disney.
Yeah, well, yeah.
It was. I think we were walking around, and I walked past it, and I was all like, well, "That's an interesting topic."
We went back to it.
Because I walked by, and I was like, I'm one of those people. I get a gift, or I like, oh, that's a good idea, and it stews on my brain. And if it sticks long enough, then I get it. And we got it like on our last bit, and we had him sign it, and that. And that, I just thought it was just, you like Disneyland, and it's a different perspective, and that you would appreciate it.
Which I did.
I don't know you read, but you're not like, oh, I've got to read all these books, and you're not like a huge reader, but I was surprised that you really took to it.
I did. Like, I don't normally dive in, because, like, there are a lot of Disney books out there that, I've enjoyed reading, but for the most part, I don't get into reading. But I like this book a lot because I felt like it was easy for me to, like, read a quick story and then put it down. It was easy for me to pick up, put down, pick up, put down.
Yeah, you could chunk it.
Yes, the book. I would say this book was not a storyteller book.
No.
It was, here's the case, here's what happened, move on to the next one.
I think the analogy, if I was going to tell someone with, you read a story and you have the ups and downs, like a meal, you have your salads, you have your meal, and then you have your dessert, and it's good. This is like eating nachos. You like nachos, but you won't feel satisfied at the end. You enjoy the nachos for what they are, and they're good, but it's not like, it can't replace like a steak meal where you like, oh, I like the overall message. There's so many little messages and themes that you get out of it, and it's just a pure factual book. Yeah, and you just pull from it what you can. So, with that being said, I think we need to put a disclaimer out there.
Very much.
A legal disclaimer. So, with this being said, we, as the Matterhorn Yodelers, are not telling you how you can get away with
how to sue Disney.
Or how to sue Disney.
No.
Or we're not saying...
In the end, you'll probably find us say, don't.
Yes. I mean, we'll tell you what has been successful in the past, but we are not here to promote the suing of or tactics of suing Disney.
We're here to review the book and talk about some of the cases in the book, and that's it.
I will like to point out that we might be talking about certain cases that involve physical injury and things like that. So if any of our listeners might have sensitive ears to that sort of subject matter, just be warned. You know, we will be talking about injuries and even death.
And yeah.
So
there's some
you've been warned.
You've been warned. Stomach churning stories, but it should be fun.
Yes.
So with that being said, I'm going to start off. There are unhappy guests and disgruntled employees, and people get hurt every single day.
Not true.
And many of them sue Disneyland because of it. This is a line from the book, and I was just like, oh, that just sets the tone for it. And it's true. Working at Disney, you learn about.
Yes.
And since I've multiple times, I'm going to sue Disney because of you.
Yeah.
All right. Go right ahead.
Oh, I mean, almost every week. You would hear that.
I'm
you
sure
would hear,
yeah.
I'm going to sue you, or
I'm going to get you fired.
I'm going to get you fired,
Yeah.
or you ruin my vacation. All three, heard them, phased me nothing. It did not
And
faze
we always
me.
end with, have a magical day. So with that being said, people are very quick to throw, I'm going to sue you. And surprisingly, there have only been, since Disneyland opened till 2015 from the book
when it
was
came
published,
out, yep.
there had only been about 1,300 cases in this book. And there's others that are not covered in the book, but...
Because a lot of them are similar.
They're very, there's a general theme, and they kind of just lump them together. Of those 1,300 that have been filed, only 265 have actually made it to trial. That's 1 in 4.
Yeah. That just shows you, like, how effective Disney's law team is in terms of making sure that these cases don't see the light of day.
Mm-hmm. And of those, 95% of them, Disney won.
Yes.
I was like, whoa.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll go into also, like, why they have such a good record as well. Most of them, and another thing that I've picked up, most of them are filed at Orange County Superior Court. So, home court advantage.
Big time.
And it's on purpose.
Oh, yeah.
Juries are local, and they favor Disneyland.
Oh, of course. And most of those juries could be employees.
Yep. They're affected by the industry of Disney. So, again, it's an uphill battle to be a plaintiff against Disney.
Big time.
And, I mean, let alone going against a corporation. And some dark with Disney. Disneyland countersues with guests that cause disruption on rides.
Mm-hmm.
And for money lost from that being down. So it's another thought. They probably threaten, like, well, we're going to countersue you.
Yep.
You know, like, oh, you did this? Well, you stuck your hand out of the ride and you did this. So it's up to you, but we will sue you. And it's like, they didn't go too much into that.
No, they didn't.
But I think it's a threat.
Oh, it totally is.
That's put out there. You know, it's just, I was like, oh boy.
Disney's not fazed by when someone goes, I'm going to sue you, and Disney goes, try.
You are within your legal right.
Your lawyer talks to our lawyers. Plural.
And though there are some lawyers that you read throughout the book that take it, or they take up the challenge because they know there's a way to do it or how to play it where you file it in a different jurisdiction. And so you have like a case in the 50s where they have no problem stretching it out for the long run. They will play the long game.
Yes,
to where people will just like, I give up. I
can't afford it.
I can't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
Like one in the 50s was 8 years. They can play the endurance game. And what I thought was, I was like, wow, they play hard. The Disney will hire private investigators.
Yes.
To make sure, like, oh, you're injured?
They'll hire a private investigator to make sure that you didn't have those injuries before or that you're faking it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's no joke. If you're filing a serious lawsuit, Disney is not afraid to spend a penny to make sure that everything's in the up and up.
That reminded me of one story that they talked about how I can't remember which ride or which show, but it basically she claimed that it caused ear damage and couldn't hear, and Disney hired a private investigator, and the private investigator saw her playing with her children, having a good old time, and said this hearing impaired does not affect her day-to-day life.
Yeah, they go to your home and they watch you.
Oh yeah.
So I was surprised by that, and they have no problem with going into your health history for pre-existing conditions.
Yep. Absolutely.
They will pull for that just to make sure that you're not just trying to pull a fast one on them, and they use it against you. So with that saying, those are some of the things we picked up from there, and we're gonna go into slips and falls. What were some of the themes that you saw from the slips and falls?
You can't win.
It's hard.
I think one of my favorite cases I read was one where a lady, she said, she twisted her ankle or broke her ankle or something on a curb, and when it went to court or whatever, they go, that curb doesn't exist.
They pointed it out.
They pointed it out, and they're like, oh no, they got rid of the curb so that the height is that. No, we have maintenance logs that show that there was no curb there. You injured yourself.
And they're adamant about those maintenance logs.
Oh yeah, that's very important. Those maintenance logs are a constant theme of most of those cases of little holes in the ground and things like that, because guests would claim that there's a hole in the ground and they tripped on it. And
or the bricks are uneven.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's their biggest way of defending themselves, is having that paper trail right there. One thing that I thought was interesting with this was the pavement, where they said the pavement is within the coefficient of friction standards and is coated twice a year with abrasion to prevent that slipping. Mm-hmm. And the other fact I thought was interesting, Disneyland with the cleanup crew, they sweep up every 20 minutes. Disneyland is swept every 20 minutes. Yep. So it's hard for someone to go, I slipped, it was so messy. And it's all really, that's surprising. Every 20 minutes we're sweeping. And it's part of the culture, right? When we were working there, you have a broom and a pan and you dust. You're always picking up stuff.
Yep, always. Even if you're not in your designated area of work, even if you're walking to work,
the Disney scoop. The Disney scoop.
That's it. The Disney scoop. You just come in, you pick it up, you walk 5 feet to the garbage can and throw it away.
And you'll see any lead with a claw to pick up trash and throw it away.
Yes, the claw. Forgot about the leadership. You don't whoa, they're a manager. They've got a claw.
It's true. They're a lead or a management if they had a claw in their hand.
This is right.
And so speaking of leads and managers, so when there's an incident that happens where someone slips and falls, the first thing they ask, or that I notice, is, were you wearing any sunglasses? Are you wearing flip-flops? Those are automatic for them going, you were obstructing your ability to walk with having those.
So be careful when you're walking around the parks in sunglasses and flip-flops.
You're on your own.
That's it.
Well, and I remember when I was working at Disney World, was the injury log in the manager's office was so important to fill out. Even if, you might have, pulled something or hurt your arm a little bit, pulling luggage or something, everyone's log in the injury log. You have to log it. Because if you don't log it at the time of the accident, there's no coverage.
Yeah, the union can't help you on that one.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and that's where you get the whole don't sit on the rails and don't jump on the chains.
Yep.
Because that's on you. The rules are there. There's a barrier there. And you read cases of people falling over.
Yep. Don't sit on the chain. You sit on the chain, you fall over and you hit yourself. hit your head or your back, that's on you.
Yeah, there was a woman who was standing in front of a gate at Teacups at the exit, and she fell and she sued Disney, saying like, "Oh, no one told her not to stand there." But Disney's
the
like,
swinging gate there.
yeah, the swinging gate, and Disney's like, "There's a sign that says exit," and the court was like, "No."
It's like, bye-bye.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was another, with umbrellas and trees. This is the one time I think Disney they can't fight you, is when a tree falls on you.
Yeah.
Or an umbrella
Tree branch.
blows and pokes you in the eye, because an act of God pretty much is the reason why, and they can't counter it. You know, all the trees, they are above eye level, like you can't hit your head on a tree. You know, the umbrellas, I mean, they can secure them as best they can, but there's wind that comes in and knocks them. But those are the only cases where they settle, because they know there's no case against it.
Yep.
And so
I know I don't know if recent, I think it was a couple years ago, where part of the Tree of Life, a branch of the Tree of Life fell down. No one was hurt, but like part of the tree collapsed.
You're starting to wonder, like, what's the structural integrity of that tree? Because it's massive.
It is.
It's getting pretty old. Somebody needs to water that thing. Speaking of water, it's hard to prove slipping on rides.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
You see it. Everyone's got on Splash Mountain, and it's wet.
Yep.
And you're like, you slip a little bit. Good luck. Good luck. Because it's hard to prove it was wet. You know, it's all like, it's hard to prove that it wasn't wet or was wet in that moment, and the logs get sent off. It's not, unless you're documenting every aspect of it, it's near impossible to prove getting, slipping or falling on the ride.
Yeah.
I mean, but you've seen with the amount of cases, Jungle Cruise. What happens when you get on the Jungle Cruise? Like, getting on and off. What do they do, Jackie?
They always have a cast member there to help you hand getting in and getting out, and that was because of a lawsuit.
Yep. And so it's, it doesn't say if you get hurt when the unloading and loading, you won't win, but they've learned and they cover their butt afterwards.
Yes,
and
they do.
They've had 65 plus years of learning of what to do and what not to do, and they're good.
If you ever wonder why Disney has some weird rules, it's probably because they got sued.
Mm-hmm.
It's true, because there was one shift that I had to do where at Caribbean Beach, the main bridge was closed, and they had a wall, standard wall blocking it. But as a cast member, they had to have cast members there blocking the wall because people would try to climb over
Oh my
it
gosh.
for safety reasons.
That's for another podcast.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And I just remember cast member or guests would be like, is Disney really paying you to stand in front of this wall? And I go, yes.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. And because of these changes, it changes the park. Like I read, Sword in the Stone used to have a step. It's gone.
Yep.
Yes.
They had to shave off some of the rock that held the sword in the stone because a kid slipped on it.
And then they got rid of the benches on the bridge leading up to the castle.
Yep.
Because, lo and behold, someone fell over.
Yep.
And they tried to assume, saying their guardrails weren't high enough, but they were with standards. And so they got it through with the grandfather rule, but they're like, you know what, we're just going to eliminate this issue. And it changes the park.
I mean, Tom Sawyer Island,
Totally different.
totally different.
Do you remember the spinning thing at the top?
The spin, the
teeter-totter
the
rock.
teeter-totter rock.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, who can forget Fort Wilderness?
Oh,
The
yes.
fort.
With the guns.
Yeah, the
Yes.
guns you can shoot the Mark Twain with.
Yes. And you could shoot the unruly natives around here. I didn't
Right.
know very well. Because of a tragic accident where a 6-year-old was shooting, she slipped, she had a ring on her finger, and she lost her finger. And
She
so
lost her finger.
they took all the guns out. I remember shooting those.
I
and then-
remember coming back. Like, I remember enjoying, that was like the funnest part about Tom Sawyer's Island was like shooting the fake guns.
Because they made little sounds, didn't they?
Yeah, they made a little sounds. And if you, like, I don't know if this is true or not, but every once in a while, like, you would shoot it, and, like, I felt like if you, like, actually aimed at something, you would hear it ricochet.
Oh, yeah, there was a ricochet. That's true. I remember
And so, and then I remember coming back, like, the next year and, like, looking for the guns, and they were gone.
Completely.
And I remember being sad, and then they closed
The whole portion of the island. Yeah. And then there's the risk of, or I like this with the shooting gallery.
Yeah.
Where they used to shoot pellets.
Yep.
Yes.
And then they have ricochets, and then they stopped calling them ricochets legally, and they'd be like, oh, that was an unidentified flying object that hit you, and so you can't prove that it was a ricochet. And so that's how they got out of collateral damage of pellets ricocheting.
Yeah.
And then they just got the laser system in the 80s, and that kind of eliminated any kind of issues with that. So
it's interesting looking at, like, old footage of Disneyland and seeing, like, how that looks in terms of, like, the safety precautions then and to now.
Oh,
like,
especially with Autopia.
Autopia, even, like, the fact that, like, you go look at it and you see, like, guests sitting in, like, grass and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
That's not a thing anymore.
No, they put guardrails over all that.
Yep.
I thought it was interesting with the animal horses. They used to have, like, pack mule trains and, like, carriages, and you just hear the stories of them running away. And Disney got out of some of those
real quick
with, saying, well, you got an attraction with an animal that can do anything. So you assume that risk. And there were a couple cases where they were able to settle, but it was very minimal from what I read. And so I was very interesting about that. And especially the pack mule ones.
The pack mule, yeah.
People are getting stomped and some serious injuries right there.
Oh, yeah.
And so when Disney sees, like, this is too much of a liability, they change the park. Like Toontown.
Toontown, big time.
Toontown.
Do you remember Toontown? You guys, I want to hear your perspective of Toontown when it first opened up, those early years.
I remember loving Goofy's Jump House.
Oh, yeah. After reading this book, you're like, well, who approved that?
Oh, I know, right?
Love Goofy's Jump
I remember
House.
you being able, like, everything was, so those who may not know, Goofy's bounce house, well, Goofy's house, which now is just like this,
a walkthrough?
A walkish through-ish thing. Like, it is a playground.
It's a shell of what it is.
It is definitely a shell of what it used to be. But, like, before, it was a bounce house. And, like, everything you can jump on, from the couch to the lamp.
Yes.
Like, you can fall on top of the lamp and it would, like, fall over and, like, oh my gosh. Like, that place was crazy. And then there was Chippendale's Treehouse.
Yep.
Oh, it was
the ball pit. The acorn pit.
Yeah, you look at it and go, you walk through it and you're like, why is this even a thing? Well, because there used to be a slide at the top that would slide all the way down into a giant ball pit, which you can still see.
Yes.
The remnants of the ball pit, but that didn't last very long, and they closed the ball pit.
Yeah, for sanitary reasons.
That was sanitary.
Same reason why you don't see them in McDonald's and Burger King and all those other restaurants, because it's not clean.
Nope.
And yeah, Donald Ducks, like.
Oh yeah, like you look at that thing now, like everything's like roped off, like they've got netting that says you can't touch this, you can't touch this section of the boat, you can't.
Yeah.
Like you used to be able to like climb all over that thing, and now nope.
Nope.
And you used to have the trolley used to walk.
Jolly Trolley, yep.
Even though they didn't have really any incidents with it.
I think they had maintenance issues.
They had maintenance issues.
That was what it mostly was.
But like you would think, like a trolley around a Toontown where kids running all over the place, that would lead to a tragic accident. Surprisingly, it wasn't the issue.
Yeah.
It was just, oh, this is going to be a liability. We know it's going to happen. Let's just bolt it to the ground. And that's why you have Toontown just a shell of what it originally was designed. Lawyers got a hold of it, and they're just like, they just killed it.
They did.
They did.
Well, hopefully it gets better when they add Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. So
Yes.
Add to it, like actually give life to that park.
It needs something.
Mm-hmm.
Because you've got two attractions there that are thematically outdated.
Yes.
You got
Roger Rabbit,
who was in one movie, and
it's not even
that was
really
it.
appropriate for kids.
It's not even that appropriate for kids. I would agree with that. And then there's Gadget's Go Coaster, which
most people don't even
know who Gadget is.
The show was only on for a year after the ride was introduced, and then the show was over.
But maybe it'll get, there'll be new interest in it when they release the live-action Rescue Ranger movie.
Oh, gosh.
We'll see.
We all know my thoughts on live action. We'll move forward. Let's go on to interesting cases. This is where it's going to get darker with the results. I like this case where it's the sky bucket, where the man, he fell out. And
so the sky buckets were buckets that went from Tomorrowland to Fantasyland, or vice versa, and actually went through the middle of the Matterhorn.
Yeah, there used to be a hole in the middle of the Matterhorn.
Yes.
And so this man, he fell out. Fell 20 feet, and he's injured. But he fell out somewhere, he fell out the one place where you weren't going to die. And he filed a case. And he came out and he goes, I strategically did it. So it kind of made me laugh, but it also shows you, yes, there are people trying to get a payday.
Oh, absolutely.
And that was the one case where it came out.
You see that all the time in the hotel industry, especially at Disney, where people say, I have bed bugs, or they're a roach, and you see our bed bug, investigator, a little beagle dog. Well, look.
Oh, I didn't know you guys had a beagle dog. That's so cool.
Beagle dog goes and looks for bed bugs.
That is an issue there at Disney World. Bed bugs.
Yes.
So, I would totally discount what their claims for it, but it is, from what I've heard, yeah.
I just know, with that case, the timing of it's really interesting because Disney was planning on closing the sky buckets permanently around that same time. And then this incident happened, and so they just we're just gonna shut it down early now because of that.
Thanks a lot, dude.
You closed it earlier than it was supposed to.
I know. I mean, we've got a friend of the family that they got stuck on there for 4 hours.
Yep. Well, that was one of the reasons why they got rid of it, because when it would break down, it would leave people stranded for hours.
And then they're like, well, you can come back another day. And it's like, I paid all this money to be here today. So it's frustrating. So I have one, People Mover.
People Mover. Oh, yeah.
Oh, this is a sad one.
Yes.
The funny thing is you don't, I would like to hear the Disney World versions of issues with the People Mover, because they don't have gates over their People Mover like Disneyland did.
No, people are getting hit, or they're sticking their hands up, or they're getting on the track. So the one that stuck out to me, everyone thinks, you're like, oh, it would be like a train where you jump on top and you jump cars and stuff like that. Well, someone tried to do that with the vehicles. He tried, and he failed, and he got caught underneath it, and the young man was grounded up, and he was unrecognizable. Like they just said, it was just a mess. And so when you say stay in the vehicle, you stay in the vehicle. These motorized things are moving, and this is an omni mover. It only stops when somebody pushes a button or something is wedged, and it stops physically. And it's sad, and young man's arrogance got himself killed as a result. So
in a brutal way.
Yeah, it's a slow grind, and it's tragic. And you would think, oh, Disney's gonna pay for that, and it's like, no, they didn't, because he broke the rules.
Yep.
You gotta stay in the vehicle. Keep your arms and legs and feet in there. Believe me, we'll tell you at the end of this podcast. Or during. Does Space Mountain, what do you guys think about Space Mountain? Do you guys remember any of the cases from Space Mountain?
Well, there's the big one with the teenagers that came drunk
into the park.
And it was
so they pre-gamed. They were ready.
They pre-gamed. They come to the park. The parking attendant said, "Go home. You're too drunk," basically.
Mm-hmm.
They left, came back, got into the park, and rode Space Mountain.
And what happened when they were on the ride?
One of them jumps off.
He somehow wiggles himself out of the ride, and he flies into the wall.
Yes.
So, I mean, that was just like...
Yeah.
And then what happens? What was the results? I wrote it down. The kid that hit the wall resulted in a month coma, and then he was paralyzed and he had brain damage. And then their case was they accused Disneyland of not stopping them because they knew they were drunk. They didn't prevent them. They didn't protect them.
Yeah.
And
yeah, there was a couple of they didn't stop them for being, because they were drunk, and then also the bar,
the safety harness.
the safety harness.
And then what did they do? Do you remember what they did in court for that one? So they showed them if someone could get out of there.
Yeah, they brought a ride vehicle.
Yeah.
There.
And they tried to and they showed them
It took I think they tried it for 2 hours or something like that.
to show if it can be done, and it was done because they were saying it wasn't properly secured. I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
And they're like, even if it's secure, someone could get out in the right way. And they brought someone who's the same stature as the plaintiff. And I was like, whoa, that was they go above and beyond. They will bring in objects into the court.
Objects, costumes that one of the costume cases that I got a good chuckle out of was, I think it was a Winnie the Pooh.
Winnie the Pooh one?
The Winnie the Pooh one, where the woman's all like, he touched me inappropriately, and so they brought in, and at that time, Winnie the Pooh's costume was vastly different than what it is now.
It was the big head one.
It was the big head one, where he had a honey pot on his head.
And that's where the head was of the character,
correct.
or the character performer.
Yes. And so, they had to bring it in, and the arms were not in the arms. They were just floppy limbs. And so they had to show it says, no, Winnie the Pooh didn't touch you because he can't raise his arms.
And it shows you the home court advantage, too, because afterwards, they did photo ops with Winnie the Pooh.
Oh,
yes.
yeah. They'll do photo ops. They'll even do special trips to the parks.
They
with
love
the jury.
bringing you through the front gates.
I thought that was so interesting how they will bring juries to the park to show the ride through, or the concrete or whatnot.
Just be like, well, it's nice and clean. We clean it all the time. Yeah, they are so smart and working the jury. I was very impressed with the lawyers, and they're not afraid to open up the gates and show them what's going on. Bring it back to Space Mountain. There was one case where the front wheel of the vehicle broke off, and the car was dangling 40 feet up, and for 45 minutes, the police or the fire department they didn't respond, they weren't notified.
Yes.
And there was an urgency on the issue, and it took an hour before some people can get medical attention, and Disney had to settle out of that one.
Big time.
Because and that's one thing, is the urgency of the cast members in these situations. And I mean, people were seriously hurt, and that's scary. Could you imagine dangling 40 feet up in Space Mountain? It's dark, you've just been battered. Oh man, I was kind of blown away.
Yep.
Put myself in that position.
Not everything goes to plan when you go to the happiest place on earth.
Yeah, and we're going into the one incident on
Correct.
a ride that's been around for 50 years.
This is not something that happens a
Some
lot.
of these cases that we're discussing happened early on when Disney opened.
A lot of the Matterhorn issues I remember reading was that where before they were on the computer system,
bobsleds were running into each other, and
there was some really bad accidents there.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to go too much into it. A lot of those were crashing, and those issues.
Let's get into some of the big cases.
Big one. What do you want to do?
The game changers.
The game changer. Do you want to get in Columbia or Thunder Mountain?
Let's start with Thunder Mountain because I think out of all of the game changers, that's probably the most known.
Yeah,
I think.
I thought Columbia led up to Thunder Mountain. It fed it a little bit.
It probably did.
But go into the story of Thunder Mountain.
So basically what happened was, I think it was like an axle or something. So when you're on the train, you've got the section where the guests sit, and then in front there's the locomotive. Not really necessary for the attraction, but it's for the theming.
Yes.
Well, something happened with the axle with that front car, and it lifted up in that first tunnel.
It broke.
It broke, and it crushed the people in the first row.
Yeah, it lifts up and lands on... The car lands on there.
Yeah.
Because it stops. The braking system hits the track, and it just lifts up and lands on them.
Yeah.
And it resulted in one person dying and one person being severely hurt. And they were family. And,
Yep.
And that was huge.
And that was 100% Disney's fault.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And it was because the maintenance crew had pulled it.
They pulled it.
And they tagged it.
Yeah, they said there's an issue with this one, and then management was all like, nope, it's a busy day, send it out.
Yeah, Labor Day. It was Labor Day 2003, and the cast members were feeling like, hey, something's wrong with this after 8 runs, and like they went on they're like, okay, this is the last run, and then we're pulling this. And they said the cast members were afraid to pull it because of consequences of management.
Yes.
And that's bad, especially in a safety situation where that's the number one rule was what? Safety.
Yep.
Always. And
Yes.
this was I think this really solidified those 4 keys of a cast member was like safety's number one. It doesn't matter. It tops all. Yeah, that was bad. Disney had to settle, and they had to apologize of wrongdoing, which was huge for Disney.
Yes.
To say we did something wrong.
Yes. And that shut Big Thunder Mountain down for
6 months.
Is it 6 months?
I think so.
They shut it down for a long time.
It was
And they found that defect was actually in all of their trains. That same defect was in all of their trains. This was from another thing, not from the book, but something else. I watched this video about the history of the Big Thunder Mountain, and they talked about how after they did their investigation, they found that all of the trains had a similar issue of that axle cracking or potentially getting ready to fail. So
yeah, that was a huge one right there. And do we want to do the Columbia or Roger Rabbit?
Let's do Roger Rabbit.
let's do Roger Rabbit.
Roger Rabbit. Okay, so do you want to do the story, Jackie, or do you want me to?
You take it away.
All right, so there was a 4-year-old with his family, and you get into the vehicle, and now we go smallest to largest. In this situation, the little one was on the outside where he was next to the door.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've been on Roger Rabbit, it's a spinning ride in a way. You go in there and it jerks and moves on this track, and you can spin it, kind of like the teacups.
Yeah.
Very similar with that kind of wheel. Unfortunately, halfway through the ride, the child is outside of the vehicle and he's jammed under the vehicle and causes a ride stop because of his body. And it basically folds the child's body in half, and at one point the child it stopped breathing and he had no pulse for 10 minutes. And again, it was another issue with the cast member not calling in an ambulance, because at the time you had to call into a lead, and the lead had to call in a board, and the board had to call in there. And that's a lot different from what we did when I worked there, that I could call 911 right away as a cast member as a result probably of this incident. And so there was such a long pause in response that the guests got out of line and they tried to help lift up the vehicle off the child.
Yeah.
And unfortunately resulted in long litigation again. And I think this was this leaves a bad taste in your mouth for the Disney company because they were not very. I don't think they did them right.
It was definitely a bad time because all of these major incidences all kind of happened around the same time. It was a bad time for Disney park management.
Yes.
Money first.
It was definitely a money first mentality at that time. Do things as cheaply as possible with the least amount of workers, and even if they would send things out, even if they weren't 100% safe, it was a rough time for working in the parks and even being in the parks during that time period.
Yeah, I agree. And unfortunately, the young man, he would not live a very good life. Or young child. I mean, he never walked, couldn't talk, couldn't eat solids, and he died at the age of 13. So he only had 7 years, and I think Disney just paid the bare minimum.
And you can actually see the impact of this unfortunate event throughout all the parks in the world today. Because before, all of these attractions did not have doors next to the attraction. Roger Rabbit did not have a door. It does now. You see that with, I think, the Monsters, Inc. ride.
Teacups.
Has that. Teacups has it.
Magic Carpets of Aladdin has a
little door. And that's because of this case. So, like, you definitely see responses from Disney when these situations happen. So when these situations happen, it has a big effect on the function of their theme parks.
And, Disney really refocused on safety.
Yes,
and
they
their
did.
leadership retrained, of course. I think you see, for me, as a previous cast member, I saw that, where management really focused on
report
it and safety for guests.
Yeah, I mean, going with Peter saying with, like, Disney time period about money first, the Columbia boat issue was something that could have been prevented if they had fixed it. And what I'm referring to is there was a tie-down cleat that broke away that holds the boat when they're loading, and it came out, it hurt a cast member, it flew off and killed a man, or there was a couple there, and the man died, and it disfigured the woman in her face.
Yeah.
And the police showed up 5 hours later, and they were guided through by Disney on the investigation, which gave Disney plenty of time to collect the evidence and present it to the police in their own way. And the police were like, okay, they just accepted it. They didn't get mad at it, and they got the witnesses they wanted that would be good in their case. And the insurance company didn't want to settle the case because they thought they had it tied down good enough, and they went to court, and the court made Disney pay $25 million.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, to lose a loved one and then to be disfigured, on something over a maintenance issue. And this is where you see, like, the insurance company was greedy, and they're like, no, this is going to cost us more money. I don't want to do this. And it cost them.
Yes, it did.
Yeah, that was huge for the settlement. And that came around the time Thunder Mountain.
Same time the Big Thunder Mountain incident happened as well. So,
but I think Disney has learned from those incidents. And
absolutely.
As you read in the books, you don't get these huge incidents anymore.
No.
And it's part of the growth of the company, because they went through phases of, like, hey, we're doing Walt Stream, and it's about the people, and then you got, like, a sluggish time, and then there's the 80s of trying to rebuild, and the 90s of, like, okay, we're booming, and then, like, let's keep the money flowing in, and then they learn, like, oh, we have a responsibility
to
of,
maintain.
like, maintain safety first. What are some interesting things else that you read in the book? We'll kind of finish this up.
Yeah, like, because it's hard to, like, because there's so much in the book. They literally talk about almost every single attraction, so it's unfortunate, like, we didn't get to talk about Indiana Jones.
Oh, yeah.
Or the Autopia. Those were big situations for the company.
Back Injury City.
Oh, yeah, big time. And it's interesting because, like, if you ever want to experience a Disney attraction and its prime, you go as soon as it opens, because
The first year it's done.
the first year, that's when they start tuning things down. It's not as jerky. It's not as fast. It's not as like Indiana Jones doesn't do fire anymore. It's yeah.
Well, it's true. Like in the book, it talks about like some of these after these cases, Disney modifies some of these like coasters to where it's technically safe enough to ride it where you don't need these safety guards, but they have it there.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I thought that was an interesting point you brought up. I thought what was interesting was the security guards. You will not win a case against a security guard.
Nope.
Because if security's called in, you've done something wrong. And the other thing was the receipt in the bag, where Disney, this lady went into a store and accused her of shoplifting. It was like, my husband has something, and the Disney security guards would bring her into this isolation thing, and like they would interrogate her, and then they had these tactics of trying to like get you to testify, even if you were innocent, by threatening you, like, we'll kick you out of the park forever.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow, that's some dirty stuff that they did, and they got in trouble with that, with those type of tactics. Just, you're dealing with like due process, and you're not formally charging people, and you're detaining them, and that's where it's like, okay, you're crossing the line. Yes, we're on private property, and you're a security guard, but you do have to notify the police if there's a situation. That kind of, and so I thought that was interesting. Jackie, what was? Did you find anything else that you're like interesting?
Honestly, what I learned by reading this book is listen to the safety guides, even if they seem ridiculous. There's a reason for it. Have your child always on the inside, never on the outside.
Listen to the cast members.
Listen to the cast members. Be smart when you go to the park. Just because you're at Disney doesn't mean you won't get hurt.
Be observant.
Yes.
Be aware of your surroundings. Watch where your foot's going.
Like these incidents that we've talked about, they were like intense and scary, but for the most part, you're going to be fine riding these rides. You're not going to... The chances of you getting crushed or decapitated or whatever is very minimal, especially now, with all the safety regulations and things like that. So the last thing I want is our listeners to feel like, I'm never going again. It's so scary. These are like these especially the last three we talked about. Those are like 1 in a million situations. So,
really, it literally is 1 in a million situation. How many rides that are launched and people ride the ride? Yeah, I didn't leave the book feeling too scared, but cautious. Like, you need to be aware. It's not, Disney's job's not there to keep you safe. It's your job in the end. They've done their part. You need to do yours. And accidents happen. That's just how we know.
And if you find yourself in a lawsuit with Disney, hope they give you a settlement.
Yes.
Because that's probably the only way you're going to win.
And that's why a lot of these cases, with a lot of things we talk about, those weren't cases where they were settled.
Yes.
They'll settle to mitigate publicity.
Correct. That's
PI nightmare. PR nightmare.
That's what Disney mostly cares about is the PR nightmare related to these cases. Not that they're not confident in them. They just want it to go away so that it's not in the news of like, oh, this incident happened at Disneyland, even though if it's a faulty, not Disney's fault situation, they'll just settle just to get rid of it.
And a lot of the times those settlements were so low.
Oh, yeah.
For the matter, like, oh, I'm hurt for this, and no. So, just be safe.
Yes, be safe.
Be safe in the parks. And with that, we're going to conclude. Please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Eventually, I'll get caught up on those videos. I'm sorry.
And again, the name of the book is The People versus Disneyland.
Yeah, so please, if you're interested in this book,
if you'd be interested in any of the law aspects of it, I've got a friend that I let borrow the book, and she used to be a law student, and she loved reading that aspect of it. So
it has that technical read.
Oh, yes.
So it's The People versus Disneyland by David Koenig. And so look it up. It's got a rat on the cover. I know you're not a fan of it, but it's there. I recommend it for those who are curious about the evolution of Disneyland and the legal aspect.
Yes.
All right. And with that being said, Auf Wiedersehen.
Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of the Matterhorn Yodelers. Please remember, before your bobsled comes to a complete stop, to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And remember...
Remain seated, please. Permanecer sentados, por favor.